We want the kids to take healthy risks. That's beneficial. These are the kids' adventures. This is their time in the forest.
Hi, this is Rusty Keeler, and you're listening to the Play Nature Podcast, where we talk about play, nature, playing in nature, and the nature of play. I'm glad you're here. Let's have a listen. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Rusty.
How's it going?
It's going great. Can't wait to talk to you.
I know. Can't wait to talk to you, too. So everyone should know that Jim is one of my pals, one of my play pals and buddies, and we've crossed paths lots of times in various conferences and woods. And well, I want to dive into all things adventure walking, but first I'll read your bio so people can get a little feel for your path. And I want to hear how you kind of fell into forest and play work and all that kind of stuff, because you're a real believer, and could I even say a purist, a play work purist?
I have a purist tendency for a lot of things, Rusty. So, I try to respect play work and what I've learned about it.
Yeah, good. Well, we'll dive into that. So here we go. Jim's path to play began after a decade as an environmental and research chemist. Becoming his family's primary caretaker opened a door to human connection and to a play-based, Reggio-inspired preschool. There, mentored by a director who championed saying yes and loving children, Jim embarked on what he calls his third degree, a self-styled bachelor's in studying, observing, and reflecting on children's playing. By 2013, he helped launch a pilot forest kindergarten program, and in 2014 founded Adventure Walkers LLC, celebrating childhood through playing in the wild parts of the great outdoors, the lost art of stopping, and the wee and the whoa. He left the preschool in 2018 to pursue Adventure Walkers full-time, growing into a presenter, workshop leader, and consultant in risky and outdoor play. This summer marks the company's 12th birthday, and Jim is quietly pleased to be sharing that story on the Play Nature podcast.
That's right.
Well, I want to hear this. Is there something recently, a moment when you had with them where you thought, yep, this is why I do this. This is it. This is the stuff.
Wow. I mean, in some ways, that happens every time. And ever since I sort of started, learning and studying and just being involved with play, and specifically when I learned about play work, and when I learned about play work, it unlocked one thing that unlocked the key was making sure you appreciate, the benefits of what the kids are doing and not just the risks that they're taking. And, and I won't go into that right now, but really that's where the we and the whoa was born, because, kids are excited about the stuff they're doing, but they're also doing, dangerous things, different degrees of danger. So I guess generally when I see a kid, maybe it's their first time with adventure walkers and they're tackling something. It could be, climbing a bank with no rope, or it could be, just walking across a log that's fallen over the creek, and it could be 3 feet high, and they're thinking about doing it, and maybe at first they decide not to do it, and then later in the day they come back and they do it. And then as they're getting off the log, usually they're either saying, I did it, or, they're given one of these right here. And
he's pumping
and
his
that's
fist,
like,
ladies
so,
and
and
gentlemen.
so it's every time that happens, I'm reminded of why I'm doing it, just for that opportunity, to sort of be your own guide throughout the day and just, be able to play out there. And there are various degrees of that, and depending on the age and the size of the kid. There's a lot of helping, of each other. There's a lot of, kindness between kids. There's a lot of, building and discovering and there's a lot of frogs.
Yeah.
And the one thing that can stop play that I've noticed is if somebody screams frog and even if you've seen a frog 1,000 times and held up 100 frogs, whatever you're doing, the kids are stopping, they're running over there, like to see that frog. So
Yeah. Yeah.
nature is very compelling. I do agree that play is the heart, but nature is a very compelling teacher.
Have you always, has nature always been a part of your life?
I grew up in Western North Carolina in the creeks and all the creeks that got flooded, in the Helene
Mm.
hurricane. So yeah, I mean, my parents would take our family up to the mountains for 2 weeks. At one point, we lived in South Carolina for a small bit, and we were constantly in the creeks, running around the mountains, you know, and that definitely seeped, I think, into my bones.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that sounds familiar. It's,
Yeah,
yep. Yep. Me too. And then I love that idea that then you are helping children, urban, suburban, everything, have those experiences.
I wanted, yeah, to give them the opportunity that their grandfather and their grandmother had that maybe it's harder to get now. And you've talked about this a lot, on your podcast. And I was struck a long time ago, when I learned about playwork about that, the image of, great grandpa has 20 miles to roam, and then the roaming has gotten smaller and smaller. And so Adventure Walkers was a way to, I can't go out there and just unleash the kids into the woods, but they can have a good bit of freedom out there with a watchful eye, you know, just always on them. But the watchful eye is making sure things are, safe enough and not, just on them all the time. And some kids stick closer, some kids want to go out a little bit. And I've always got a lot of staff that's able to, go with kids down a creek if they want to explore and or stay with the kids that are built, they're making castles in the sand of the creek or building forts or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you're scoping things out, keep it like safe as, necessary, or just looking out for hazards or whatever. I think that idea of play work, or people that are inspired by play work, is kind of like the answer, one of the big answers to like getting kids back out again and having parents feel comfortable again. And whether it's really in the woods or just in the, the neighborhood park kind of thing.
Right, right. Yeah, I agree.
So tell us the story. How did you get there, get where you are now, and the discovery? I mean, I'm really interested in the discovery and aha of play work, how that resonated with you and the forest, and how you experimented with that, and talk people into letting you try experimenting it and with it, and then
Started working at our daughter's preschool, I think around 2007. And, I was at a school that was, was excellent. The staff was, incredible. And I learned, really so much from the staff as much as I did just observing the kids playing. But I was, I was keen to go on as much professional development as possible. And in 2009, somebody brought Robin Moore into town, and he talked about risk in play. I remember the graph, and I remember him saying, if you really were worried about risk, you wouldn't go on vacation to the beach. You know, I mean, there are plenty of risky things like that we do, not even thinking about it, or that
okay,
parents do maybe. And anyway, he said two words. He said Wald Kindergarten, which is outdoor preschool in Germany, and play work. And so both of those words sort of kind of led me on to find out more. There were two play workers from from England. The very first day, one of them had the classic, better a broken bone than a broken spirit quote. So, and we were off, and we were just playing with sticks. We were, going through the playwork principles. There was some lecture components, and then we would go off and do different things just to kind of solidify what they were talking about. Yeah, it was just incredible. And like I said, sort of the notion of kids are going to do risky things, they could get hurt, but before you just stop it, you have to consider, what the benefits are. They talked about the research at the time, and there was, already research showing that risky play was good for you, or that kids playing and taking risks. And in fact, I left that weekend thinking that was when I first started realizing that safe enough is what you should be trying to shoot for, because
Mm.
there's no way to keep a kid, 100% safe. And of course, now there's more research sort of, validating that. But at the time, I went back and I was kind of, just sort of, I had a different lens on the kids playing. I mean, we were already a nature preschool before there was one. We were out, wooded wooded playground. You've seen that now. You
Yeah.
when you came to visit,
Yeah.
and yeah. So, but it just gave me, you know, permission to myself anyway to like let the kids extend the kids' play, a little bit.
Yeah. You started stretching more in that direction.
Stretching more in
Yeah.
that direction, and and just not, I read the other day about somebody, saying if you see kids maybe doing something risky there and they're playing, give them 19 seconds. And it's interesting because I feel like at one point it was 10 seconds. Now it's up to 19, which is a positive in my mind, because it's a little bit more time to really see the gold that these kids get into. And as you said earlier, of course, there are hazards that you can live with, and then there are hazards that, you can't. And every organization is going to have a different line for that. And that's another thing that I learned, along the way at another Robin Moore conference, was that no one can come in and tell you like what risks to let the kids do and not do. For one thing, it's their choice. A risk is a choice. But you have to decide, as an organization, sort of what your risk parameters are. But at the
Yeah. Yeah.
time, it was just little stuff that the kids were able to do. You could tell they were getting so much out of it. So at some point, the forest kindergarten was the other word that I learned about. And so in 2013, after, I've been reading about different variations of that, and then realizing that every country sort of has their own sort of version of that. And whether it started, in a Scandinavian country or was it Norway, perhaps, I learned about it, through the Bald Kindergarten, Forest Kindergarten. But a big part of that, when I learned about it, it was a play-based enterprise. And so that was just another area where all of a sudden now we're out in the small woods behind our preschool. And there are more risks, and the kids were the kids were thriving, and they were, nature, as I think David Sobel said, calibrates to the kid. And there was a
Mm.
fallen tree with a giant stump, and some kids would climb to the top, and some kids would stay at the bottom. Some kids would climb on the roots in the back. Some kids would just sit on the half stump that was left, and everyone was loving playing out in nature, like in their own way.
Yeah.
So now, and as a teacher, it's hard to not like create something and that can be, for all the kids to do. I mean, that's what teachers in the best of circumstances are creative, and they are good at putting together like curriculum that can wow you and be great. But I really wanted it to be out there in the forest. I was kind of, I suppose, going purist, and I wanted, we're go out with the kids.
Yeah.
We got a hand washing station. They're washing their hands. They're going to eat their lunch, and then we're going to be out there for 2 hours. it was a half
Yeah.
day preschool. So this was like an extra thing and they would sign up for the year.
Right.
And I wanted it to be, let's just be out here. And so a lot of play, ensued. But there was also exploration. But during open time, which was a big part of the day, the kids could go around. So it really was a mixed age situation, just kind of like high school is. And that's one thing that I wanted Adventure Walkers to be a mixed age situation
Yeah.
because,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd heard, and you feel this too from your youth if you played, that, when you're out there in the woods, a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old can be exactly the same. Like when you're trying to save the salamander from probing hands, and then when that's over and the salamander's safe, like you go your separate ways and you might not see each other again. But there's that moment when you're with another human being, they're younger. Normally you probably might not even talk to them. Everyone's got their, climbing the bank. You could be a 5-year-old and be this dynamic, amazing climber. And the 9-year-olds are like, wow, look at that kid,
Yeah. Yeah.
or you can be a big brother or big sister for the first time. You might not have any other siblings, and you're helping this, 4-year-old find a crayfish, or or helping them walk a log or build something. And so, yeah, that was unique about that preschool. And then we would all go outside together into the big sort of semi-wooded playground.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting, like how you were talking about the teacher and preparing the environment, say the indoors, preparing the classroom and activities. And certainly I saw that in like the water room, which still blows me away. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
water table and water stuff and pouring, and kids wore their, they had their little smocks on and stuff. And it was,
right.
and you had tons of towels. I mean, it was a crazy wet mess in the classroom, but all those different Lego rooms and all that kind of stuff, that's like prepared by the adults, and you could see that, like, and they were working around the outside. And then when you go into the woods, it was almost like the opposite of like, boom, there's the woods, and you just have at it and see what
Right.
happens. And that's, I don't know, that's just an interesting thing too. Sometimes we think about like outdoor classrooms. People are going to build outdoor classrooms. And so they might build like counters and tables and storage, and which is great. Okay, it's neat to have that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But I think of like just the plain old woods. There's your outdoor classroom.
There's your outdoor classroom. Yeah. And that, not only are teachers, do they want to teach, but when you're organizing and building, your first thing you're thinking of is your classroom. And, you know, so I suppose it makes sense that people would do that for an outdoor classroom. But yeah, what about just the time component? Like, what if? And I've heard you say this. What if we don't build anything like you're saying? We just go out and see what's going on, And that's kind of the approach that I took. And it's the approach like with kids that is you're best served in getting to know them. I mean, and play work is a very relationship forward, endeavor, and really getting to know the kids, not just for the risky things they might do, and if a kid's a good climber or not. And when you're out there going into a forest, is if you've never been to one, which a lot of the kids haven't, it's a risky proposition, or has a feeling of danger just going in there, and so
The thicket,
give these
the wilds.
the wilds, yeah, I mean, give them time to sort of find their place in that. And you can they may stick close to one of the counselors, you know and find a counselor that can be a buddy for a little while, and then at some point during the week or during the day, they may sort of find another kid they can hang out with, and grow from there.
Yeah. What's the age range typically, or sometimes
So
with your adventure walkers?
when I started, it was you had to be eligible for kindergarten, and so that was and it was going to go to like 8, and I was that was kind of going to be the sweet spot of the imagination, and it was, it was going to be a very imaginative like time, but eventually kids started wanting to keep doing it, and so it basically became elementary. So it was kind of like
Okay.
5 to 10, and then some kids wanted to keep doing it also, and so I made this JCAT position, which is junior
Ah,
counselor at training, and instead of junior counselor in training, which is a JSIT, so you
yeah,
get a JCAT,
yeah,
and that was
yeah.
just, that's my, sense of humor or fun. And they got to be sort of half adventure walkers, half, part of the staff, or they get to carry stuff for me.
There you
Um,
go. Yeah.
and they get to kind of hear me talk about the philosophy, and ideally then as they get older, they can, be a junior counselor or volunteer, and then as they get even older, they can be a junior counselor and work, some during the summer.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I
but
love that.
yeah,
Folding it in next generation.
yeah, and there have been kids that have done a little bit of everything, so
Okay, so if you're like kind of sort of through osmosis, but also teaching some of these younger people, the in training, the at training, and junior counselors about playworking a space, what do you tell them? Because if they're watching you, it might look like you're not doing anything.
right, and that's the one thing about play work that parents can hone in on that kind of thing too. And that age, I just want them to enjoy being in the forest, to be with the kids, let them know that that these kids are pretty capable. They can do a lot of things. You don't need to help them unless they ask you to help them. You don't strictly have to do anything, but if they do ask you to play with them or play chase or walk down the creek, that you can do that. So, and then as the staff gets older, you know a lot of the talk is about risky play and how we want the kids to take healthy risks, and how that's beneficial. And I have to, I mean, I spend a lot of time talking about these are the kids' adventures. This is their time in the forest, and that can be it's like a person to person, and for a kid that is maybe wants to dip their toe into sort of getting into the staff side of things, you still may want to do things. And of course, there can also be a 10-year-old who's an adventure walker that is sort of, let's go build a fort, and everybody's going to build a fort all of a sudden. And so, I try to tell the staff, don't worry about making mistakes. We're gonna this is their time, but if you end up, leading a trip down the creek and everybody goes, and then we're going to talk about it. So we try to reflect at the end. On a good week, we're reflecting daily, or at least at some point during the week, and we talk about emotions that they have experienced either vicariously through the kids, or if there was a kid that was about to do something and you were just terrified and you
Yeah.
stopped them from doing it, and then upon reflection, you think, well, I probably would have let them do that now, and so at least you're growing, personally. Or a kid, was you're watching a kid all week and they wanted to jump the creek, and there's a lot of like gully and creek jumping. They wanted to jump this gully, and the last day they did it and they got so excited. So that's sort of how the training is at training. I mean, there's, because everything I feel like is tied to your emotional relationship with the kids, and again, just talking about making sure that they are the kids' adventures. And there's a lot of talk about, risk and hazards. And
Yeah. Yeah. I like that idea. The one of the things so many things we love about play work, but that idea of the self-reflective part, the self-reflective
yeah,
practice of, because when you're really out there, especially you all who are in the woods with kids, and there's creeks and there's logs and sticks and sharp stuff and rocks and, whatever, is a constant dance of how you want to intervene or clear a hazard or say yes, or you're doing your counting to 19 and watching what happens. But that reflective afterwards, and I think that's one of the things that everybody can, who works with children, sometimes it's, if it's real top down with the adults, leading the way and everything, maybe it's not reflective. You just keep plowing ahead and, leading the way because you're the adult. And, but really, I mean, I think I like the play work because it also opens up the vulnerability in the adult to be like,
yep,
I'm doing the best I can and I'm trying to support this, but I don't always know if I'm making the right decisions. And maybe I stepped in maybe on reflection, I shouldn't have stepped in because they were okay. I only counted to 10 and not 19, or I should have stepped in. I was being a purist or thinking, oh yeah, just don't, I shouldn't intervene at all. And I really should have. And the idea of being honest, because ultimately the next day is a new day and
yeah,
you can make different decisions yeah.
yeah, I agree. It's a good way to learn about yourself and be with kids in the process. And you also, there's that notion that play workers always talk about that, there's going to be times where you have this feeling in your stomach, this tension, right?
Mm-hmm.
About, can I let them? This seems like something bad could happen. Well, yeah, remember things can, hurts can happen, and no one wants it to be a big hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think? Here's a question. What do you think? What do adults usually do too much of that you're trying to do less of?
They're having too many teachable moments and asking like too many questions, like right at the, I'm trying to, as I learn through play work, to give the kids time and space, and permission to play. So I think that's one thing.
I mean, jumping in and feeling like they need to teach or they need to be reflecting
Yeah,
what the
yeah,
kids are doing and
yeah. I mean, the kid, and the kid is floating a leaf down the creek or
yeah,
something, or
yeah,
maybe they made a rudimentary boat and they're floating that, and they're oh look, if you did this, like, that would really float. And I've probably been guilty of that before. Something just catches you, like such a basic thing, and you want to jump in there and make it better. I think one thing like adults don't do is just talk to other adults more. Because I mean, if there was, more talking to each other at the playground, then in some ways, like the kids get that feeling of, oh, they're talking to other adults, and I'm just, you get a little bit of feeling. I mean, there's, especially while play is happening, if you're constantly being interfered with, that's got to have an effect on you, psychologically, like I'm not good enough.
huh. Right. Yeah. I think of play as like this flow that's happening, this flow,
Right.
and you do need, you need to create that space, and maybe the play worker is creating the boundaries or holding back the world, but that it's interesting. Yeah, the adult can be poking into that flow, like
Yeah.
yeah. How long is a adventure walking session typically?
I guess typically, I don't know if there's a typical, Rusty. I mean, it was a half day camp for a long time.
Uh huh.
Now you can kind of do the AM morning and afternoon sessions, and you could be out there for 8 hours. I mean, there are some tunnels that are in one of the parks in Richmond, and there's a parking lot, and we've done the drop off right there. There have been mornings where we just haven't left because the tunnels are so rich of a play environment
Yeah.
and a
Yeah.
nature environment
Yeah.
that, or we've been there, for a couple of hours, and I'll generally will wait for a kid to say, "Can we go somewhere?" And so there could be an adventure walk where if I have enough staff, one group might be loving the tunnels, another group they might want to, start walking and or they might have a specific place that they want to go because they've been there before. So, what is a session? For me, that session started when we got to the tunnels because that's where like the play started and that's where the kids wanted to be. And, there's no walking. I've had 2 hour sessions. Four is sort of what I've settled on as that was like going to be my half day.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just you need a little bit of time. I mean, it's hard to
Right, right.
whenever it's shorter than 3 hours, it's kind of just not enough.
Yeah.
And now that I started doing you could go all day, it's wild just talk about your meta mood. Like there's, plenty of time of just, kicking the rock around and then all of a sudden thinking of something to do, you know?
There's enough time to have things happen, and then there's in betweens, and then
You,
there's, yeah.
yeah,
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 that's interesting. The idea of the adventure playground is being like, okay, here's a designated space, and there's where the children rule, and that's their, they have the adult support around the edges, but they can. And yours is, it's almost like it's a ranging space, and it could be a one space. You could stay there all day if it was, engaging at the creek and fallen logs and the tunnels, but it could also just meander and find its way, different places.
yeah, yeah. Well, now, I mean, I'll get parents that say, so you take kids on hikes. And of
Yeah,
course, I'll say, well, hikes from A to B, the parents yelling at them to hurry up, because
yeah,
they want to see the view and they got to get back because they have stuff to do.
yeah.
And so I definitely did not want that to be, adventure walking. So ours is, yeah, it's a little more meandering and, you know, but it could be 50 yards. The kids are playing and they're there for 4 hours and then we turn around 50 yards back and get picked up. I mean 50 yards has never happened, but there's definitely there's not always a lot of walking.
It could be anything. Yeah,
Could be
there's
anything.
no destination like on a hike.
That's
So,
right.
so that's.
Yeah, yeah.
Do parents ever get scared?
People will ask questions. I've talked to one parent and they said, they ask if I do background checks on staff. And yes, I do background checks on staff, and so they'll ask, specific questions like that. They'll ask about staff ratios and, partly because of Forest Kindergarten, which, the staff ratios on those are, depending on the age of the preschooler, but, somewhere 4 or 5 to 1. As kids get older, you can have more kids, that ratio increases. But it's always been kept kind of low just because I want to be able to have the freedom, or for the kids to have the, freedom to really, it's kind of the freedom to keep doing what you're doing, you know, because if we're all traveling around in a big group, like and at some point, and we can vote, and we've done that before, with groups, like kids are loving it. But some kids want to go to the tunnels, and so we'll just vote, and sometimes it's 12 to 8 want to go to the tunnels, so we go to the tunnels because there's just not enough staff to keep it,
Right,
and
right, right.
and then generally everybody finds something there that they want to do. There probably are parents that wonder how dangerous it is, but I'm not sure exactly. Like I don't. If you could tease that question out a little bit more, like worried about like that we're gonna just let the kids jump off 20-foot cliffs or something, or that kind of
Yeah.
danger, or just being out in the forest. Like there's all kinds of dangers.
I like what you said just a minute ago about having the ratios, enough adults so that essentially so the group can split up. So if some
Right.
kids want to move on and do other things or feeling, adventurous in that way, and other kids can just, like you said, just stay in one spot and not be pressured or have to pull up.
It's sort of I don't know, it just gives them a little bit more freedom to keep doing what they want to, what they want to do or change
Yeah.
it. It's not necessarily a sustainable business model as if if you're trying to sort of maximize what you're earning, if it's no matter how you slice it, and that like really wasn't necessarily the starting point. I mean, when I did this, it was kind of like, oh, you know, can this happen? Can this be done?
Yeah.
And, it was a smaller group and it was just for a week. And then I was also, still caretaker for my kids and for our kids. And so I just, started adding time to it pretty quickly. And I mean, it is kind of an interesting notion that of being able to split up and you got to, communication is the biggest part of staff. And
You have walkie talkies.
we have walkies at this
Yeah.
point. The walkie talkies, like I'll give however many I have, that I can spare. And so they're just like talking smack on the walkie talkies. I
You
mean,
give the kids get the walkie talkies too.
sometimes it's a kid, like a staff will have one
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
whoever's going with, like
Yeah.
a particular group, and they're hiding together, but it's really funny just just hearing the banter, and these are the older kids,
Uh,
these are the like fourth and fifth graders. Yeah, that's something that like in the afternoon, I just started doing the afternoons, and they're a little bit smaller, so I've been able to sort of try these things out in a little bit smaller, you know, context. It's still a work. That's still a work in
yeah.
progress.
Yeah. Hey, let me jump continents here for a
Okay.
sec. And Scottish trip. I want to hear so any reflections you had, or what you learned, or anything that surprised you, or what that you're still thinking about. Yeah, what are some things that stuck with you?
Well, we were visiting a lot of outdoor nurseries,
Yeah,
specifically Stramash, for outdoor nurseries, and then others that like they were associated with through various dealings and trainings and projects and stuff.
yeah,
For one thing, just seeing, and these are outdoor nurseries or preschools for us Americans, all day, and essentially it's sort of forest schoolish or forest kindergartenish in that they're all day, like in the same spot, no matter the weather. They're play based,
yeah,
but so you can just tell the kids they have time and space and permission to play.
yeah, yeah. They felt very at home at that
They felt
place.
very at home.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's perfect. And, considering like a good preschool, could be, grandma's backyard, that's a feeling that you want. Like you
yeah,
want them to feel that way. Preschools are, they're becoming all day preschools are becoming more and more of a necessity. And interesting. It is mind blowing when you see it was an empty lot or an empty
right,
field or
right. Just planted and
in
built.
fact one of them was still an empty lot. One of the four was being transformed as we were there.
Yeah,
And I'm still reflecting really but every time I talk to somebody here about their preschool, or I'm instantly making that trip becomes a connection and a conversation piece to sort of as something that they could, you could push it a little, what you're doing, or they'll say, they want to do X, Y, or Z. And I'm also constantly using your, as far as space goes, because more limited. I mean, that's the one thing that the Highlands had. The spaces are bigger than
yeah,
your average, like outdoor areas for a preschool,
yeah,
especially city ones. But just, you're always very good about creating space that that you didn't know you had, or looking at your fences and seeing if you can, expand past that. Although I think that even Cameron, like with the space that they have, like I think he's constantly trying to,
Grab some
probably
more land.
grab some more
Yeah.
land.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you don't have to, it's nice to have all that land.
Right. Right.
And I do, it makes me wonder, like, you know, there's probably areas in cities that no one really thought about. And hopefully, especially, the urban neighborhoods are going to be able to utilize that kind of land that's not really being used.
Yeah. Well, how about let me sort of wrap up with the question for listeners who love this idea of what you're up to with, kind of the blending of play work and the adult role supporting play and nature, and the idea that like this the forest, the idea that it's like it's so open-ended, that puristness of yours comes through here of like, hey, we don't know what we're going to do, and we're going to really follow the kids, but if they wanted to try it, like what would be a simple way to start, like, is there some way that they could, something they could stop doing that would help step in this direction, or what would be like a simple way to go?
Well, I love the word pilot,
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah.
because I mean it gives you permission to fail in some ways, but really start with a small group. I was a preschool teacher. I was already taking kids into our backwoods, for our forest kindergarten program. And I kind of asked three or four families if they would be interested. I just wanted to see if I could do it, what would happen. And it was, six kids, there were three people on the staff. I was just, going out there really and just, we're going to take a walk in these woods and then just see, definitely if you come to a creek, the kids are going to stop. I quickly called what we were doing the lost art of stopping, because, kids are masters of stopping and smelling the roses. They're just not, instead of roses, it's a fallen tree,
Yeah.
you know, and they're stopping and playing on that. So really, don't worry about having every question answered, but just, kind of go out there and take a walk and see what happens. I mean, like the spreading out portion that first week, and it was, it was all sort of four to mainly 4 to 6 year olds. So really just getting out there and then like talking about it with each other at the end of the day, and then going from there. Like, just do it for a week. Go ahead and say like I'm gonna try this out. And the hard thing is like, am I doing anything when I'm just out here and not doing anything?
Uh-huh.
You know? Because sometimes, the kids are just, kicking around, and, there's that tendency to like, let's do X, Y, or Z.
Right, right.
And
So,
I think we had and this could have been another person on staff. Like it was somebody's birthday, and so they were like, let's make use the sand and and everybody used nature loose parts, like, and made birthday cakes. I think that was like the biggest thing that we did.
right, right.
And I guess my point with that is, be yourself, try to let the kids be themselves. But if you end up wanting to do something, like I said, that, we played this game at the beginning. It was the sensory game. I think of it as like a sneaking game. And at some point during that week, the kids wanted to play it down, wherever we were. And so I would, give them the blindfold and the water bottle, like, and then they would play it wherever we were. There's always going to be, it's a fine line. I mean, I'm still out there, how much of an impression am I making on this scene? Like, but also at this point, there's kids that have done it for 5 years. and going to a lot of the same places, and they're still loving it.
Yeah.
But surely they're making an impression on, like they already know a tree that's good to tie and climb a certain bank.
Right.
They're
Right.
telling kids, let's go do this. So, really just it's about once, something's going, that's not interfering. No.
I mean, I love the idea of the pilot. Just that's giving permission to like try it out, see what happens, be self-reflective. And the idea of following the children, maybe this idea of like, okay, well, watch. And that could be taking kids to the forest, but it could also be like everybody who has a fenced in play area. And like, well, what if you got inspired by what if the yard was an adventure walk, meaning letting kids do whatever they want and stop and, not be doing things. And
Yeah,
in some ways it's like that. I think that's, you stand for that, just like watching the play and honoring the play and, upholding it and believing that it's important. Just the nature of the play is important and
for sure.
yeah. And people can
Yeah.
bring that wherever they are. Well, Jim, thanks so much for chatting and sharing. And I know
Thanks for having me.
we have a bonus of some pictures and memes because you're also a Play Nature meme master. So maybe we have a bonus. We could look at those real quick here. But
Yeah,
maybe
let's do it.
We'll sign off for now for the
I love those.
conversation.
And 12th birthday's coming up this summer. It'd be great to have Rusty Keeler down here
Oh, there we go. All right.
celebrating 12 years old of adventure walking.
Yeah. Love it. All right. Thanks for listening. Do you have a comment or a question? Email me at playnaturepodcast@gmail.com. You know I like talking about this stuff. And maybe we could use your question on a future podcast episode. As always, I have some free goodies for you in the show notes, including my outdoor loose parts guide. Fun stuff in there. And so I wish you the best in your outdoor play adventures. And when it comes to adding nature to your yard, or loose parts, or saying yes to risky play, my favorite motto is dream big, start small, and never stop. Oh yeah. Woo, 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 woo. Let's do it. All right. Have fun out there.